and let's get into it.
Let's get stuck in then. As you already know, if you've been listening carefully, this is part one of Alan Moorman. It is Batman the Killing Joke. It is illustrated by Brian Boland, and it was first released in 1988. It is one of the seminal Batman Joker stories, and it showcases their codependency, questions whether they can find peace through commonality, or will one of them have to die.
So Alan Moore is one of my favorites, and him writing Batman is great. The thing that gets me is like you see a lot of if you didn't know it was Alan Moore writing it and you read it, you would almost immediately know it was him. Just the way that is nihilistic the right word, or the style that he writes in almost is just like the way that he writes these superheroes, but like his villains, they have this demented sense to them. That nothing matters, and they want to show the world that. You see, it's so well written, and it matches that tone of the late 80s with Batman, when you had, the Dark Knight, you had the Killing Joke, you had Death in the Family. And so it really goes along with that time period of Batman. What I really think is, reading it again, I still love it the same. I've seen how things get polarized so easily. And I feel like people would look at this and not see Joker as a villain, but a tragic hero. And that's my only negative thing I have to say about it. But art is subjective. And so, anybody can pick up and think what they want about it. But I just really think that it showed how quickly Batman could be taken to his breaking point.
Yeah. How did you feel about it being the first time that we saw a Joker origin story?
Okay, so the Joker even admits to himself, and I think that was Alan Moore's thing. One of the big things about the Joker is we don't know who the Joker is.
Yeah.
We don't know who the Joker is. We never have. We don't get a solid background story or an origin story. And even when we think we do, as the Joker's mumbling on in those pages about his past and how one bad day and all this other bullshit, he's showing himself as an unreliable narrator for the story when he says things like that origin story might not be the truth. And so you can't take what he says for truth. And we know that about the Joker anyways.
He said he likes to think of his past as multiple choice, I believe the quote is.
You see things like that and you're thinking to yourself, is this what's going on? Or is the Joker just trying to draw us in to feel bad for him? Almost showing weakness and feigning retreat just so he can surround us in a phalanx of horrors like he does Commissioner Gordon. I don't think that's his origin story.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. When I was reading it, I thought one of the literary tropes is a madman doesn't know he's mad. So when he's explaining how easy it is to go mad, I felt that it was a madman trying to adopt a persona of a straight guy to outwit his opponent. I completely agree with you there. I think it's like the whole unreliable narrator thing throughout the story.
For me, it was a comic about madness going wild and a mechanical process of destroying each and every character in it. For me, at least, Joker wins because Batman ends up laughing. So madness runs free and wild. So for me, it's one of the most depressing comic book ever made. There's no hope in it. Absolutely not. I know that a long time ago, it's ultimate battle between Joker and Batman. And I know it's been done later, countless times, but never to this point. Never to this depressing point.
I'm interested in what you think about who the protagonist of the story was, because it's quite an evenly balanced story whereby you've almost got two leads, and we're obviously you're on the side of good, but I'm not too sure during it whether it's a Joker-centric story or if it's a Batman-centric story. On the front cover, it's the same because it's Batman, a killing joke, but the image on almost every edition is of the Joker.
Joker-centric, definitely Joker-centric. What it did to Barbara Gordon. Still now, it's horrific. And we had since Guy Gardner's girlfriend's head in a refrigerator, but it wasn't that horrific. And the reaction of Batman at the end, Batman laughing. When did you heard Batman laugh?
Ever.
You remember another issue, another title with Batman laughing? It's Joker winning.
It's funny, when I hear Matt talk, I got a comment with this motherfucker. When Killing Joke was doing the rounds, I weren't literary. If there weren't a fight in the book, I'm like, what's going on? I want to see a fight. By the time I read it, like, what have I been missing in this book? Shit, this is actually fucking good. And I was just like, I mean, I loved Alan Moore from before, from 2000 AD, so I was getting his stuff anyway. Alan Moore essentially made a definitive version of the Joker because we spend so much time looking at this guy's supposed history, be it tragic or a fool. And you just know it's going to end badly, but how badly unravels. It really is a solid gut punch, and it's as much that story as it is anyone else's. As we know, the Red Hood now is canon.
One interesting thing, I hadn't really thought about the unreliable narrator, just going back to a couple minutes ago when you guys were talking about that. I just think that is so interesting because I read this book as a sort of meditation on madness as rationality. And it's very interesting to think about how the backstory that's presented might itself be a rationalization. And I think that is really, really, really interesting insight you guys had on that.
One of the things that I think about, like y'all are talking about madness, we know that the Joker's crazy, and he talks about the one bad day thing and that rationalization of what happened to him under the Red Hood. I really think that his way of dealing with that one bad day was going mad. The things that he does as the Joker is pushing more people to be like him, because if it happened to him, then it could happen to anybody, and he wants it to happen to everybody. I don't know, man. It really shows a different side of the Joker, less of a, I mean, he's insane, of course, with the prison escape. We have to talk about his intellect, at least. I mean, he's already gotten the guy to sign the papers before he takes care of the guy at the fairgrounds. When you look, I mean, even in real life, guys like Ted Kaczynski, a genius, but he was also the Unabomber who got so fed up with society and the way that it was going that he moved into a shed out in the woods and started mailing bombs to people. It's just one of those things that kind of ties it together. Like, we talk about how mad and insane he is, but we never mention how insanely intelligent the Joker is as well. His genius always foreshadows that. And the way that Alan Moore writes him is less of the insane guy who's screaming on the streets, but more the insane guy in like the role of Ozymandias from Watchmen, which the Killing Joke and Watchmen draw a lot of parallels between each other.
I think, Tim, it's a good point you make, because memories in general are unreliable. People think that your mind actually works like a video recorder, but in actual fact, everything's split up into individual elements: the color, the sound, the smell, where you were, what you thought about something, saved in like-for-like spaces in your mind. And what happens is, over time, some of the connections between the synapses stop firing, especially the ones that aren't being worked and aren't being used. So when people pull back their memories, maybe 10, 20 years later, and they reconstruct it, what you were thinking may be confused with what actually happened. And I think it's really interesting that you say that even if it's intentional or not, that the recollection that we see in the pages might be his forced narrative of what he's suppressed, and when it's recalled, it was actually toned to differentiate between the current day and the past. But I think it also gives it ghostly, almost psychosomatic state that implies that it might be in some way a false recollection. So yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up.
I once was reading an article that mentioned something kind of like you were saying about memory. Every time you think about an old memory, you're really just remembering the last time you thought about it, not the actual memory itself. And that's how things get changed so quickly. Because like you said, you know, the way you think it happened and the way things actually happen get twisted up over the years. By the time you think of something that happened, you know, 20 years ago, and you thought about it 100 times, you're seeing the 100th different version of what your mind cooked up that day. And I think that's a really good point to make, that he could be twisting the events of what actually happened because of his either failures as a father and husband, or going mad, not being able to handle daily reality. He couldn't find a good reason for why he went mad.
The mind's fucking crazy, man. The mind's fucking crazy, let alone the Joker. Like, just how it works. It's so sophisticated.
You were just talking about, it's a genius that is unbridled, unlike Ozymandias, which is forethought and meticulous planning. What Joker does, it's unbridled with no fucks are given. The way that he works, it's all out. People that are close to me that have had psychosis, it's amazing how they see the world.
I think the comparison between the Joker and Ozymandias is the difference between sociopathy and mania. It's basically the difference between Donald Trump and Kanye West.
Actually. I see what you mean by his kind of off-the-cuff thing, Brian. We see him as more psychotic. We don't mention his level of intellect because, well, like you said, he's doing this stuff off the cuff. At the same time, if he's doing it off the cuff, I did a way to break Batman in half in the course of a day. That's the difference between Ozymandias. Ozymandias hiring scientists to drop a giant squid on New York. That took months and years of planning. And Joker broke Batman in a day.
But the thing about Batman is that he's able to base shit on your fears and what you're able to do and not do and work in and around that. If you are unbridled and you don't have any reason, where does he go?
If I could double back to something that Ollie was speaking about, even if you didn't know it was an Alan Moore book, you would know it by the writing style. And one thing that stood out for me that seems to be like a current presence across his work is there was a form of sexual battery left open-ended, whether it was actual rape or not. I don't think that is something I would consider typical of the Joker to do, unless it was for the humiliation of somebody else to actually see it. Especially after reading some of Lost Girls, where it's basically all that. Do you think Alan Moore puts the perversion in his stories, or do you think the perversion's in Alan Moore?
It's in his stories, man. There's tropes that he uses because he knows the type of emotions that it elicits, and he knows how to toy with your emotions. He did it. I haven't read Lost Girls, but I mean, I've read Watchmen, I've read V for Vendetta, and I mean, of course, Killing Joke. And you see not just the sexual assault being present in all of them. I think it's more of a humiliation thing. Not so much he's drawn to those aspects, but that he knows a good way to destroy somebody is through humiliation. Funny enough, he didn't think that he was going to be able to kill off Barbara, Batgirl at the time. And when he walked into Lin Wine's office, he was like, hey, I'm thinking about crippling Barbara. And Lin Wine was just like, cripple the bitch. I don't give a fuck. And so like Alan Moore was just like, okay. And so he even now he thinks he may have gone a little bit too far with it. So with that, I don't think the Joker went any further than just stripping her and taking the pictures.
Brian Boland said that he wasn't comfortable drawing that. And he also said that he wasn't comfortable with the Joker origin story, but he said specifically drawing that he wasn't comfortable with it.
I don't think she was raped. I think that he's more for getting a reaction out of people. The Joker doesn't necessarily have to go all the way in to get a reaction. Yeah, that was unintentional, but you have at it.
I like the callbacks though. It's Trojan War again from the last episode.
Hey, I'll double your entendre, Ali. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sure. I think that it was more for the unknown, like showing those pictures to Gordon. He didn't know if she was raped. He didn't know what had happened. So just the visual alone is enough to break somebody. And I think that the one thing that's very interesting is that we are our most vulnerable when we are stripped. It's brought you down to your core. That's the one way that people can gain control. Some of these panels were just creepy as hell. Little doll people, nightmares for days on that. I don't like carnivals. I don't like clowns. I haven't seen Freaks. I've been trying to find it. I
think I got it on DVD. I'll send it to you if I can.
Okay. I found it incredibly sad, but I don't think there was a real winner in this at all. I don't see where the Joker really won in some ways. I think that even though he did get Batman to laugh, there's a loss on all sides here. Was this a basis for the film, Joker?
I don't.
Nah.
Although on that note, I think that one of the things that we spoke about, the fluidity of his origin and of his past, and that was something that was in the Heath Ledger character as he was telling all the different origin stories, and it was kind of checkered and
that was amazing.
changeable. The Heath Ledger Joker is probably a closer fit.
That's one reason why I haven't seen the newer version. When someone has a performance such as that, it's hard to move beyond. But I loved the writing. I'm going to be seeking out more of this because like I said, I've never read Alan Moore. It was brilliant. I liked all sides of it. For me, I like him when he's just completely doesn't give a shit. He'll shoot somebody just because. No remorse, no nothing. I find that more gratifying than to have to humanize him in some way. The anonymity of the Joker is what is enticing.
I think as well, there's a great comparison between what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago in Wonder Woman 84, when they did I can't remember his name, and that is only to my benefit.
Lord.
Yeah, I think so too. In this case, they weren't really trying to get you to like the Joker. I really don't think I think they just wanted to give an explanation, but I don't think, whereas with Maxwell Lord, they're trying to get the viewer to humanize him. I can't see the Joker as ever being human, to be honest. People that may have tragic beginnings or don't have tragic beginnings or circumstance that are just plain evil.
One of the comics themes was this really interesting mirroring the way that it started with the puddles and finished with the puddles, the way that there was reflective images between the throwbacks and also the current day. There was mirroring between the villainy and superhero-dom. It's this tit for tat matching, and I think it had a dramatic irony between the relationship between Batman and Joker, that there is, as Vision said in the Avengers, our very power invites challenge, the escalation between them, and that sort of brought it round to the speech that Batman gives Joker when he says, look, we need to talk because this is only going to end up with one of us dead. That was a nice, again, bookend because it was mirrored at the start and at the end of the story. This almost perfect symmetry.
You mentioned mirroring. The mirroring that you see Alan Moore do between the Joker and Batman. We talked about his genius's intellect. The Joker knows who Batman is. The Joker's known for a long time now. And I think he knows in that book. One of the things he does to try and show Batman the classic villain thing, we're not so different, you and I. He cooks up this backstory because he knows that something has happened to Batman. Something's happened to Bruce. And he uses that story to draw not only Batman in, and he's showing you that what Batman's doing is the same thing that he's doing, just on opposite ends of the spectrum. They are just mirror images of each other. But when Batman broke, he didn't break the same way that Joker did. What that did is piss Joker off. He's the one that's been trying to break everyone. When Batman talks to Gordon, and then when Batman goes for the final showdown, he tells him, Jim's not broken. I mean, Barbara's broken. For fucking sure. Like goddamn riding a horse thinking you're Superman broken. But, that's terrible. I'm sorry. I have nothing against Christopher Reeves.
You're not taking a side, though, are you? You're not on the horse's side. You're not on Reeves' side. We don't want any more of that nonsense.
No. Me and Allison are on the horse's side.
Oh, well, finally. At least we'll retain 50% of the listeners this time instead of alienating both. 50%.
You're damn big right. Voice fan over here. Anyways, what it's showing is exactly the opposite of what Joker's trying to prove the entire book. You have a guy who's been broken down to the most animalistic type of human. I think it was Brian that said everything he does is without consequence. And he's going all out, not really thinking what's going to happen next, but thinking what's happening in the moment. Kind of like a predator hunting prey, basically. Anything that he does with that 100%, like Brian was saying, but he does it with this tenacity and this just ferociousness, can't be stopped. He's like a storm. As much as they're different, they're one and the same. Batman laughing at the end shows that.
One of the most quoted parts for this I was aware of beforehand, that was, as Brian's corrected me in the past, you take through osmosis from the Zeitgeist. Unlike, of course, anything to do with the Fantastic Four, which should remain a mystery to everybody. So it only takes one bad day. Maybe it's me having a misconception of what most people would think, but I think that would be seen as a central theme that runs through, and that's drawn into the comparison. Do you think that that's a valid narration that carries through the pages, or do you just think that's a soundbite from the Joker to justify himself?
More than one bad day, because it becomes a cause célèbre for Batman, so that it doesn't happen again.
We saw how capricious his temperament was in the initial flashback as well, whereby he's on a depressive moment when he comes into the house, and then he
just loses it.
Like manically aggressive, and then he switches back again. Not only a nice part of foreshadowing in a flashback, but it was also, I think, something that counters the one bad day argument, because it showed that it was possibly an inherent behavior before the one bad day happened to him.
Brian, you're a fan of hip hop. You listen to Mos Def at all?
Of course.
Okay. The secret to the straw that broke the camel's back is the 1,000 straws that were stacked before it. It's not that one bad day. It's a series of them. The thing that drives Joker is because he knows what Batman's doing. He knows that Batman had that one bad day.
Exactly.
But it did, like I was mentioning before, it didn't break him in the way that he was broken. And although it may not be the way we were shown in the comic, something happened that drove him to that. And now you see him coming in the house and he's showing those moments of not rage, but I guess rage. And you see that he's already got that in him. And people like that really can flip on a dime. And so how are we to know that he wasn't the one that ended up killing his wife?
Exactly.
I thought that might be where that was going, as a first-time reader. Batman is a little bit more complicated than that. It's not only that his parents were killed, it was the injustice of what succeeded it as well. And there wasn't that process.
There was no closure.
again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Too simplistic to possibly say that Batman was just one bad day. I think it was the succeeding event. Going back to the mirroring thing that we were talking about, that Joker was probably the 1,000 cuts beforehand, and they sort of met. And sort of perfect.
There's something that
one thing that troubles me is I think you give the Joker too much credit in that he's acting consciously. Joker is really something else, like a force of nature. It reminds me of an old interview of Greg Rucka when he was writing The Punisher. And in his run, The Punisher was almost mute. There was almost no dialogue from Frank. It was because Rucka was saying the character doesn't need to speak. He's a force of nature. His actions are speaking for himself. It's the same thing for the Joker. There's nothing conscious in him. It's just a force that is released, destroying everything in its path. And I can see him raping Barbara Gordon, not for the sex, absolutely not, just because it's destroying someone. It's one of the reasons I hate the three Jokers concept. The Joker shouldn't have any origins or several origin stories with unreliable narrators. So we don't know what's true, what is being invented.
I actually agree with you that I don't think it's planned. It's our moral boundaries of what we think immorality is. There's a landslide in the storm. It's not the landslide's made it worse. The landslide is the storm.
That's interesting, because I actually think of Joker as being asexual almost. It's like he's always a very slender person. There's never been a buff Joker. Also, the way he performs is quite androgynous as well, and the sense of theatre as well.
He is in a loving relationship, although not without its problems, with Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And like there's been, and he's passionately in love with her, even through his madness. Now it doesn't show what we think passionate love is. And when people do that, oh, Joker and Harley are goals. Like, no, bitch, they're not. Not the point. The thing is when you mention the androgynous of him and the more the feminine slender. Hey, you know what? David Bowie was a slender androgynous fuck machine.
Yeah.
I don't think he's able to love anybody like wholeheartedly. Any person that kind of psychotic position has things that they tether to, and it's more selfish than it is selfless. And it's more he doesn't need them around because he needs love. He needs them around because he can use them for the things that he needs at that time when he needs it. I fully believe that Joker's acting on full animalistic instincts. So I do think sex comes into it at some point, but I don't think him attacking Barbara would be in that sense. Look at the themes and like where Joker has lost his sanity and gone towards that more animalistic side. When Batman lost his sanity, you really do have to be fucking insane to put on a goddamn costume and go around punching people dressed up like fucking penguins and jokers and.
So I read the same version as Al did, and as I said earlier, that John Higgins was brought in as a colorist, and it wasn't to Brian Boland's liking, so he redid the whole coloring, and I was really, really impressed. I thought it sort of sat in this uncanny valley of the skin tones and the fading and the light and shadow because of it being digitally remastered. That this eerie, lifelike look to it, but you still had the really in line work around it. So you were aware that it was still a comic, but it looked that lifelike. It was unnervingly in the
when you get to the past
valley.
the past part where it's all sort of sepia toned. You get the idea that you're looking back on something. And I like that kind of noir kind of feel to it a little bit. The carnival scenes I absolutely adored. Got this sense of madness with all the clowns and the people and the freaks, basically. In a sense, that's what we think the Joker is. He's basically this sideshow of psychosis. The cover itself was actually a photo used as the premise for the actual artwork for the cover.
I've just done a Google search, and I'm glad that it showed me exactly what I was expecting. I simply searched Joker comics, and the first 5 images are based around the picture of the Joker with his hands on his head with all the ha-ha-ha's in the background. I seem to have known about that image my whole life, and I had no idea it's from The Killing Joke. I think the specific way that the art added to the dramatic of the story, most comics, especially when they're written to a solicit, which I know this wasn't, because I think it was one of the first graphic novels to be produced, where it was written and released in its entirety. With titles that are on a monthly solicit, there's a propensity to have everything from an eye level POV, that everything's quite flat with the characters in the center, and you feel that you're at eye level with them. What this does to fantastic effect is it changes the POV of the reader, and whether it's further away to make it seem more agoraphobic, or if it's close in to make it more claustrophobic. The way that the characters were drawn so uniquely, awkwardly, that the appendages, especially the neck and the way that heads were twisted, it's almost like the body was out of sync and then the eye line was with you. When you look at the headshot, it was zoomed right in, so the head wasn't almost completely, or it was touching the panel edges, so it was zoomed in on the expression, and also to give that totalitarian realization, like when Gordon sees Babs, when he sees the images of her and it goes right into his face. So that's the only thing that you're focused on. An example of making it look sparse is when Joker's on the throne. You feel like you're looking from ground level up. All these steps, the baby dolls all the way up. You can see the vastness that he's on this pedestal and he's the sole point of focus with all this madness almost cascading down to your eye level at the bottom of the page. At times it looked almost cartoonish, and that was a great juxtaposition between the Joker and the everyday people, that you had him almost looking like he was in the comic, where the other people had tones of realism in. I don't know whether I'm just seeing things because I enjoyed it that much, but I think there was a real attention to detail with each panel. I was really impressed with the way that this was drawn.
I draw on that, Matt. One of the consequences of that point of view shifting that you've identified is that it draws the reader not just into the narrative, but it almost implicates the reader in the sense that rather than the standard sort of point of view in an ordinary solicited comic, that's you in some ways watching a story, right? Yep. But this, in the story, you're drawn in and sort of implicated in the narrative, and that is something that I thought connected beautifully with the cover. I'm not a cover guy. I don't collect covers, so I don't know or pay much attention to them. So I don't know to what extent covers are generally so deeply connected to the internal narrative of the story or the substantive themes of the story. I don't know if Boland drew this or who drew this cover. It is so striking because what's happening here is you have Joker looking at the reader, in effect, shooting a picture of the reader, which draws the reader into the narrative immediately, right? It's the story telling you that you are part of the story.
You're the subject.
Yeah. And it foreshadows, not only that, in addition to that, it foreshadows the Barbara Gordon scene, of course, because she opens the door and he's looking at a gun. And in both images, both the Barbara Gordon image where she's literally shot, and in the cover where you're figuratively shot by a camera, it foreshadows that, right? It's like we're being captured and shot. And in a sense, in that way, it's literally the comic's first killing joke, right? You're being figuratively shot by the camera. And so it is, I think, just so thoughtful and how it connects to that point of view idea that the reader is very much implicated in the narrative.
Again, it's a suffocating close-up. You can't see all of the Joker. You don't have to see his arms. You don't see the extent of his hat or his elbow. It's just him as close up as it possibly can do. It's in your personal space. Yeah. But he's got it in front of them. I just want you to open it and flick through a few pages. And I want to see if you can notice how much focus is on hands. On every page, there is hands front and center.
Why is there an emphasis on the red? What's the deal with the lobster? What's the deal with the bow tie and obviously the hood? You know, like why are things that are unnecessarily in red?
I think it kind of ties in with the hands thing. When you think about hands, they can build, they can destroy. There's a left and a right. It's about balance. There's a sort of synchronicity there, but also be powerful in a positive and negative way. And I think the color red's the same. We instantly connect it with both anger and with love. And then it's almost coming back to the symmetry and the balance and equal and opposite mirroring again.
There's hands and hands are an extension of what we're trying to say. When you hug someone, you use your hands. If you want to punch somebody, you're going to use your hands. A good side and a bad side to those particular appendages.
Yeah, if you're having a sleepy day in bed, you use your hands.
You know, it's interesting that if you look at the last page, the fourth to last panel where Batman has Joker by the neck. Right after that, there's an image that it's our last image of Joker, and it's just of his hand. And the hand is palm up in a kind of way which might suggest how you might reach your hand out to shake someone's hand, but also in a kind of maybe potentially penance.
Communion too. Yeah.
Exactly. I read this book originally back. I have the pre-deluxe edition, so the original edition. I don't know what my printing is, but I got it, I think, like sometime in the late 90s. And one thing that's interesting, just as an aside, is when you first start reading, you ask people for recommendations, and people tend to recommend the best books, but ones that are not suitable for introductory readers. I have this perfect memory. Well, perfect memory, right? We talked about how memories are flawed.
Liar! Scoundrel!
One thing I do remember is the coloring, how striking it is. It's filled with these just kind of grotesque greens and oranges that are so incredibly striking and fit the theme. So I think it's interesting that Bowen wanted to recolor. But my general impression of that is just how well the coloring and art suit the thematic mood.
I think picking up on that, it's a really interesting thing about Batman's costume. When you look at superheroes, Spider-Man, Captain America, Wonder Woman, Superman, the heroes are in primary colors and the villains are in secondary colors. So like Green Goblin, thinking Jack-o'-lantern, I'm thinking the Joker. But Batman he's tonal. He has no color. He's treading the line, isn't he, of vigilante. There's just one more thing that I want to ask. To be a perceived ambiguity towards what happens in the final page, if whether Batman kills Joker or if he doesn't kill the Joker. Now I've read some precedents to it, and I also think that it's never referential through the DC line afterwards. So I would say that he almost certainly did not kill the Joker. But we now know that there's 3 of them, so...
I don't think he killed him. What I find interesting when Batman says, this isn't going to end well, you're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you, resonated in the back of my mind, is Batman saying this to him because he's trying to save the Joker or trying to save himself? I don't think he killed him, no.
Either option, he's either going to be literally or figuratively dead.
But he's one that tries to save people from the tragedies that he went through. And in some way, I think he's trying to save the Joker to save himself.
Yeah, he's got a lovely dick as well, hasn't he?
I have not noticed.
Why?
I haven't noticed. Come off it. Oh, God.
I'm not an expert in that area, but, hey, to each his own.
I'll send you a few pictures over the next 24 hours and we'll bring you up to speed.
You do realize that the phone companies record all of that stuff, right?
I'm going to final set piece Wonder Woman, my dick to the world.
Oh, there are a lot of those in the world, aren't there?
I don't know whether Joker's killed or not, but let me suggest that he is. If you look at the last page, the last 3 panels, there's no characters in the last 3 panels. It's just a shot of the rain-soaked ground. And in the first 2, you have a beam of light going vertically across the panel, which of course is meant to suggest the beam of light in the actual Killing Joke. And so the Killing Joke, if you remember, there's like 2 guys, burglars, whatever, and they have to cross right a building. The one guy gets over and the other guy is like afraid to do so. The first guy says, hey, I have my flashlight with me. I'll shine it across the gap between the buildings and you can walk along the beam and join me. And the guy's like, no, you're just going to turn it off halfway across. And so the last panel, there's no beam at all, suggesting that Batman kills the Joker, right? The beam is gone. The guy's dropped and dead. Yeah. And that would connect very deeply to the idea of like when Batman says, and he says it several times in the comic, we're going to end up killing one another, aren't we? Mm-hmm. So it may be that Batman, in fact, kills Joker. And then in doing so, Batman, figuratively dies. And so both are dead. So it fulfills Batman's prophecy. And the art suggests a connection to the actual Killing Joke. So that would be an argument for, yes, that he does kill Joker.
What I like about that, now you pointed out as well, is that beam goes perfectly down the middle as well. So it offers symmetry between the 2 again. Wow, that is blown my mind.
That's beautiful.
It's the mirror. Holy
brilliant
shit!
If I could just add one more thing, looking at the page that I noticed. Like I said earlier, the last shot of Joker is of his holding his hand out, as if he's inviting Batman to help him across the figurative beam. That further supports an interpretation that he in fact dies because he's asking for help. Help me across the beam. Extend the beam. Help me across. And Batman turns it off.
I just got
so anyway,
Fuck, all right, Tim. I see you.
Wow.
You're making me think outside the box. I don't even have anything to add. I'm just dumb as shit over here.
If that's true, it kind of upsets the continuity. To what extent parts of this are continuity? Obviously, the Barbara Gordon stuff is. She becomes Oracle.
Continuity, but taken out. I mean, DC is very tricky with continuity, and so it may not be in mainline DC continuity, but it's definitely a continuity of one of the multiverses, almost like a what if.
And as you slap that book back together, I think that we'll slap a closing note on this episode. Guys, so impressive. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I certainly did.
Definitely. You did as Ollie, you're like, I'm going to ask everybody what they're thinking, and there's 3 Jokers. I was going to say, I'm thinking that you shouldn't bring up fucking Jeff Johns, goddammit. And then you didn't anymore. And then you get to the end of it, and I'm like, you just gotta fucking drive it in further. We got the whole fucking episode without you. And you mentioned 3 Jokers, and I was like, okay, that's fine. You know what? He'll mention Jeff Johns.
That we should probably leave it there. So, Wally, would you like to bid farewell to everybody and maybe blow Goose a kiss?
Not sure about the kiss, but goodbye, everyone.
Al, would you say goodbye to the
Goodbye, Ollie.
Bye, everyone. It was great. Thank you for letting me be a part of all of this, and I learned a lot. Looking forward to more.
Not at all. Thank you very much for your presence. It was most welcome. Tim.
You know, when Matt sends me packages, they're actually labeled Tim, Tim. That's like the address. Goodbye to you guys for the week, and to all listeners. It's been a real fun. I think we've now entered the well-established canon where we take longer to discuss a piece of content than it takes to consume the piece of content. And so it's been great fun. And I learned a lot of really interesting insights, guys. So thank you.
Did your wife pick them up and go, what the fuck is this? What have you been up to, Tim? Tim, have you been on the internet again? You know, no good comes of it. No. Yeah. What's an internet?
Please, sir, can I have
Why are you getting fucking stupid packages in the post again? It's MySpace all over again. I thought you were over this, Tim. You promised me.
Oh, man.
I'm not even mad at you anymore. At least it's not European, is it, Tim? Oh, for fuck's sake.
Oh, man.
And then, Tim, that's when you enter your Joker origin story.
Right.
Well, before I cause any real offence, I'll ask Goose and Brian to say goodbye. So, starting with Goose, what have you got to say to the people, my friend?
I had a blast today. We got, like Tim said, we got some great insights. And speaking of great insights, fucking Tim was just like detective mode, almost better than Batman with some of those insights. They were things that I hadn't noticed, and I've read this book, countless times. Because it's one of those you can just read on an afternoon, real great. It's super awesome. I love the fact that you send him packages that say Tim, Timony Tim, because I don't know if you noticed on the one that you got for Christmas, but it was Spanky the Magnificent.
I'm gonna use that.
But no, it was great. I had a lot of fun chatting it up with everybody.
Leads me to bid you farewell, and thank you all for tuning in and listening to the end. I hope it was as entertaining as it was informative. So that only leaves me to say we have been, and this is the end.